Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Bryony and I'm one half of the Indecisive Readers. January was an interesting month for me because I was only reading romances. Now there are 2 or 3 exceptions to this, but basically in February I want to do a video talking about romances and about how much I don't like romances. And so I thought to do that I really need to have read some romances basically. And so January I spent reading nothing but romances. I expected my average rating to be quite low for this month because they were books I wasn't expecting to like, they were just books I felt I should read. However, it wasn't terrible. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I had a lot of 5-star books and not as many 2s as I expected. I also didn't actually have any 1-star reads. I finished a total of 4,431 pages. I also read 378 pages of The Priory of the Orange Tree. I'm 12% of the way through Postscript and 7% of the way through Dreamland. So there are a few books I've got kind of waiting. I also read 200 pages of the other book I'm going to talk about. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about the books I read. There's no order to these books, I'm just talking about them in an order because I read Heartstopper on the first day of the month and halfway through and then at the end of the month, and I read the Scott Pilgrim ones over the whole month, and I'm just kind of putting them together in an order of some sort, but I don't know what it's going to be like when it actually comes out. One of the reasons why my ratings in January were so high was I read some books I knew I would like as well as ones I thought I wouldn't, and one of those series was the Heartstopper graphic novels by Alice Oseman. This is volume 1, 2 and 3. I haven't read any of them before, so yeah, I read them all this month. I really like them. They're really cute, they're feel good, they're, you know when people describe books as fluffy? These are fluffy, they made me smile a lot. They're about 2 boys who fall in love. I think the front says boy meets boy, boys become friends, boys fall in love. And that's basically it. Charlie is gay, he's gay when the books start. I mean, you're gay all your life, but you know what I mean. He's gay before the books start because he was outed last year against his will, and so the whole school knows he's gay. He had to go through bullying, had to go through people judging him, and now it's kind of all finally settled down, and he meets this boy called Nick, who's a year older than him and sits next to him in class, and he starts to form a crush on him, but is kind of broken up by this because he knows that Nick's straight, and so he's really upset about this and is trying not to get too caught up, but he just loves this guy, he loves hanging out with him, and then eventually they kiss and realise that they might like each other. And in the second one, Nick comes to the realisation that he's bisexual, but it's like a really slow process. He has to come to that realisation himself. He's looking up articles, he's doing like quizzes, which is so teen. It feels like teenagers actually going through this. And then in the third book they almost have to come out again, so Nick has to come out as bisexual but they have to come out as a couple. And I just think they're really well done. I think they're lovely, I think they're so cute. Volume 2 was definitely my favourite because, like I said, I just think the way Alice Oseman handled Nick coming out, or Nick coming to his own conclusions, was really well done. Volume 3 hints at a lot of things that I think are definitely going to get dealt with in later volumes, like eating disorders and self-harm, so I feel like that's going to come up more in the next one. But it's just really cute, nothing rushes into it, there's no immediate proclamations of love, which is something I hate. And at the end of the third one, I think Charlie's looking up how to say I love you, which is just so precious. I don't know when the fourth one's going to come out because this one is meant to come out in 4 days time, but I've obviously got it here, so I think I'm going to have to wait a while for it. There was a big cliffhanger at the end of volume 1 when Sam got it, and I'd brought volume 2 for him, was going to give it to him for his birthday, and he paid me to have it then. So yeah, they're just really good, it's really cute. I recognise one of the places in volume 2, I took them back to the beach. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I rated this one 4 stars, this one 5 stars, and this one 5 stars, but this one's definitely my favourite. Some other books I read in January were the Scott Pilgrim books by Brian Lee O'Malley, There's Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness, and Scott Pilgrim Gets It Together. This is a series of graphic novels about this guy called Scott Pilgrim who needs to defeat the 7 evil exes of his current girlfriend to date her. And so each volume follows him as he tries to defeat one of those exes. And I've read the first one before. I read it back in June. No, I think it was May last year. And could remember it. Have seen the film before, so it wasn't completely at a loss. But I thought it's only 168 pages. I might as well reread it for the sake of continuity. I think there are 2 more. I haven't read the last 2. I haven't got the last 2. Sam's got them, so at some point in the year I'm sure I'll read them so I can say I finished them. I rated all the books in this series 3 stars because I enjoyed them. They were good. The art style was nice and clear and easy to read. It was quite funny at times, but I just wasn't as attached to it, so like not a bad thing, it's not my favourite thing I've read. I have watched the film, and I've watched the film before reading this, and I think these make sense as 6 different volumes. But obviously a lot of the other stuff happens in this, and if you're not as interested in the other stuff, it kind of feels like it goes on for a long time. Which it didn't necessarily. There's a lot of interactions with friends, all the characters get along. Some of the characters are really annoying, but that's because that's their character. But I think it's quite a quirky concept. I like the idea of the having to defeat the 6, 7 evil exes. That's quite funny. I like that. I like how it's almost like video game themed, and how they level up and they get special powers, and each of the exes has like a different magical ability or power, and so that's quite good. They're not just, here's so and so, he can use a sword. Here's so and so, he can also use a sword. Here's so and so, this one can punch. They've all got different abilities, they all fight differently, they all have different relationships with Ramona. But yeah, so I enjoyed it, just didn't love it. Another graphic novel I read in January was Princess Ever After by Katie O'Neill. This is a really short graphic novel about 2 princesses, one called Amira and one called Sadie. And Amira rescues Sadie from a tower, and they go on a couple of adventures and obviously fall in love. This was a really, really cute graphic novel. The artwork is really like distinctive, it's colourful, quite cartoony, quite funny, quite magical. It deals with, even though it's only in a short time, it deals with some really important themes like fat phobia and the character who is being prejudiced against because she is plus size doesn't have to lose weight, doesn't feel like she needs to lose weight to be justified as a character. She's just like, okay, yeah, I'm fat and yeah, I'm a crybaby, but that doesn't make me a bad character. And I think that was really nice. I loved the romance in it. These 2 really made me smile. And there's one line in it where Amira says, I've got kick-ass hair, and Sadie's like, yeah, you do have kick-ass hair, and she does. She's got great hair. It also deals with some kind of expectations, especially like gender expectations. So as a princess you're obviously expected to settle down with a man and rule, but Amira's like, I don't really want to go and do that. I want to go and rescue some people, I want to go on adventures. And so that's really nice, but also Sadie doesn't necessarily want to. When she's with Amira she's quite happy to, but when she's on her own she's also quite happy to stay at home and rule a kingdom and do more traditionally feminine things. So I quite like that they didn't have to do one thing, but they also didn't have to do another. I only rated this one 4 stars because although it really made me smile and it was really cute and I love the artwork, it was only 50 pages long, and when graphic novels are as expensive as they are, you kind of want to get a bit more content. But the content that was in there was amazing. I love the end pages. I keep looking at them, so I'm just going to show you. What can you see? Like, you can see the 2 girls in like a cute kind of style. So yeah, I really loved it. I just wish it had been longer, even if it was just 50 pages longer, just to see more of them, but what there was good. One book I read in January, which I wasn't expecting to love but actually didn't hate, was Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, by the Twilight Lady. I've never read Twilight before, but I thought, I'm reading nothing but romance. Surely this romantic, lovely thing is the thing I should be reading. I did have it a bit, you can't actually see, mainly because I didn't actually use that many, but also because it looks like I haven't finished it. I have finished it, but on this side is just Life and Death, which is the Twilight reimagined, and it's basically the story but gender reverse, and apparently it's a different story, but I haven't read it. But if you don't know what it's about a girl called Bella who moves to a new town called Forks, where her dad lives because her mum's travelling a lot with her new partner or something. In this new town she makes some friends, but she's interested in the family that sits away from everyone else, called the Cullens. Mainly because one of the boys, Edward, seems to hate her and she wants to know why. But it seems like the Cullens have something they're hiding. They're secretly vampires. So obviously, yeah, that's the big shocking secret thing that is hinted at in this, and we do find out, but you don't know at the start. But obviously I did know at the start because Twilight's a huge thing. Even if you haven't read it, you know what happens vaguely in Twilight. You've seen clips from it, you've seen people talking about it. It's not exactly secret anymore. I think I may have seen the first film, but I don't remember anything about it, so it was actually still a surprise when I was reading this. I didn't know what was going to happen at the end until it was happening. So to be fair, that did keep me a bit in suspense, but I didn't hate it. I did rate it 3 stars. I was expecting to give it like 1 or 2 because I was just expecting it to be a lot worse than it is. I think the discourse surrounding it makes it seem really bad, and also makes Edward seem a lot more creepy than he is in the first one. I mean, obviously staying in someone's bedroom and watching them sleep is creepy, but he doesn't do anything a lot weirder other than constantly knowing where she is and following her around. I mean, that's weird, but I thought it was going to be a lot more abusive or creepy or just weird. And it wasn't completely terrible. All of these books were read during a reading vlog, but I have a separate reading vlog for this, so if you're interested in my opinions, I will link that down below. I thought it was really interesting watching my video back actually, because I start reading it going, oh, I hate this, I don't know how I'm going to read it, it's so bad, and then towards the end of the vlog I'm also like, I'm really tired, I don't want to do anything other than read Twilight. So yeah, I don't think that there's necessarily anything good about it, but there were a lot of bad things, but no bad things that made me hate it. One book I did hate, or at least really didn't enjoy, was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. This is about a woman called Stella who has Asperger's and just can't deal with romance. She can barely deal with kissing, and on the few occasions where she has had to have a sexual encounter, she's basically just shut down. So she hires a man called Michael to teach her how to be better at sex, and he helps her out, and then obviously eventually by accident, not at all as expected, they fall in love, but they can't do that because he's an escort and she's looking for another man, but there's no communication, and so they break up and they have a big fight, and then he follows her around for ages to get her back. And obviously that's okay because it's a romance book, but it is not okay. You should not follow someone that you just want to go out with. Yeah, I rated this one 2 stars. I think Sam was quite surprised I rated it that highly, but it wasn't completely terrible, it was just mostly terrible. Like, I don't know if I hadn't been reading it with such a critical eye whether I would have hated it as much, because I've read The Rosie Project, which is a similar kind of idea where an autistic person can't deal with love and so makes a plan to fall in love and then accidentally falls in love. So I don't know if I would have hated it as much in different circumstances, but it was so bad. As you can see, I've tabbed it, and the first one I used up was Orange, and Orange was cringy. There were some horrible lines in here. My favourite couple of lines being, Stella didn't seem to know it, but she had the kind of nipples men and babies dreamed about. Stella Lane, conservative economist, had porn star nipples. Then on the next page, just as he'd planned, the new position brought her nipples to face level. Though, if she wasn't careful, she'd poke an eye out with those things. Only in his line of work was blindness by nipple assault a true hazard. It's just so horrible. Like, it just made me uncomfortable to read it, to be honest. Especially the bit about babies liking nipples. Like, that's not okay. So, I didn't particularly love it. There was a lot of sex in it. I felt a bit bad, kind of liking it. But then the end was really, really creepy. A lot of problems with romances in books is there's no communication, so something happens and then they just don't talk about why it happened or what's wrong or the fact that they really like each other. Whereas if they just had a conversation, it would be okay and would solve everything. And they don't have this conversation, and then when they both realise that they both still like each other, they just like, no, we can't do it. And instead of just letting it lay or talking to each other, he follows her around for a week and sends her presents and sends her roses and waits outside her building until she says yes. And then when she's having an argument with him, he grabs her face and kisses her and stops her talking. And that's like such a common trope in romance films, where if someone's shouting at you, you just kiss them and it's okay. And it's not. Don't do that. Don't follow the advice in this. It's so bad. But yeah, it wasn't, I mean, it was completely bad. I don't know why I rated it 2 stars, but obviously when I was reading it, I felt more attached to it, so maybe I was extra kind. But this is only a library book, so I do have to take all of these out at some point, but I enjoyed tapping it because I like having the creepy, cringy lines to come back to. Another one I annotated was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This was a reread for me. I probably haven't read these books in at least 5 years, and so I could remember it but not enough to know all the details of the story. I also haven't watched the films in ages, so it was actually really good. Like, I knew enough of what was coming to expect something was going to happen, but I didn't know the details of what was going to happen, so what happened was still a surprise. I tabbed it for various themes. In Twilight and the Kiss Quotient, I tabbed it for specific things like kissing or non-intimate forms of bonding, whereas this I tabbed for themes. So in this I had feelings for show and genuine feelings, so that's not necessarily themes. But obviously I was reading this with romance in mind, and so I had to tab that kind of thing. Then I also had demisexuality because I hardcore believe that Katniss is demisexual. I also had PTSD or trauma, war and violence, greed and rebellion. And so it was really, really interesting for me to see how that changed throughout the story. In terms of romance, I think there were a lot more genuine feelings than I expected. There was almost a lot more feelings for show at the end, once they're out of the arena, which is weird because you'd think she'd be putting on more of a show inside. But I think all the time she genuinely felt sorry for Peter, and so she genuinely wanted to make him better. So that comes across a lot in the arena. I actually really enjoyed looking at how the romance progressed. So I think a lot of people have a problem with the epilogue where it doesn't seem very Katniss to have children, or it just felt a bit random. And yes, it did feel a bit random, but I think it was very Katniss. I think she's such a mother. She mothers Prim, she mothers Rue. And so I think in different circumstances she definitely would have had children. But I can completely sympathise with her not wanting children before, because I'm not sure I would have wanted children. Especially in District 12, I think I worked out 148 tributes have gone into the Hunger Games and only 4 of them have come out. That's a big percentage of children that haven't come out. Yeah, you've got 1 in 37 chance of your child surviving this. But yeah, I'd be scared if I was potentially having children in this, and I think Katniss has every right to be. I think she does genuinely like Peter. I wasn't sure at the start, I can remember whether Peter genuinely liked her, but having read it back, I'm like, no, he definitely does. But I do still stand that the public proposal kind of thing was a bit weird. if it was any other setting it would be creepy, but obviously it was a tactical move. And so I think he did it really well. I think it was interesting to see how the romance changed. I think that Katniss is demisexual because being in love is never her priority, which again, in a situation like this, obviously it isn't. Survival is the priority. But even when she is thinking about romance, it's all very tactical. She's not got genuine romance feelings. She might have genuine friendship feelings towards Peter in this, but she doesn't feel romantically towards him, and she definitely doesn't feel romantically towards Gale. And so the first time she kisses Peter, she's like, oh, it's the first time I've ever kissed a boy, but all I can think about is how hot his lips are. And how she really struggles to profess her love, and all these other bits. I think she's definitely demisexual, or at the very least just can't talk about romance. And yeah, if it wasn't clear, I rated this one 5 stars. Another book I read in January was It Only Happens in the Movies by Holly Bourne. This is my library copy, but I did actually go out and buy an actual copy of this after I read this because I really, really enjoyed it. So many of the bits resonated with me. This book basically just sums up this whole month of reading. That yes, there are great things that happen in romances, but most of them only happen in the movies. It's split into 5 sections as Audrey, who is the main character, goes through her media studies project where she's dissecting romance movies, and the story follows her as she falls for this guy called Harry, who she works with in the cinema. She knows she shouldn't like him because he's bad, everyone's told her he's bad, he's every cliche rolled into one, but he's still quite hot, so she can't help it. So I rated this one 5 stars. It's also a Holly Bourne book, and I always love Holly Bourne books. I think she does feminism really well, I think she does YA really well, I think she does adult really well from the adult books I've read, but I just always love her books. I picked this one up from the library as a kind of, almost like a way to break up the romances, because I knew romance in this wouldn't necessarily be a good one, so I thought it would be quite nice as a contrast to some of the other ones. And yeah, I really loved it. There were so many lines in it that I thought, this is great, I just want to highlight you, I want to write all over you. Holly Bourne takes every cliche and smashes them to bits, basically. I thought it was really, really well done. I loved the characters in it. I think the romance was really interesting. I also thought the romance was great because it's not, here's the romance, I love you. It's, here's the romance, I quite like you, maybe I'm falling in love with you, oh no, never mind. And maybe my favourite thing about it was there wasn't, spoiler alert, a happy ending. There was a happy ending of sorts, but there wasn't a happy romantic ending. She is happy in herself, she's happy in the course she's about to do, but she's not in a relationship that isn't good for her at the end. And I think that's so refreshing, especially in a teen book where the emphasis is on being in a relationship. I think it's so good to see something a bit different, and yeah, it's Holly Bourne, so I love her anyway. One of the books I cheated with this month was Fairy Tales for Fearless Girls by Anita Guarnieri. It was a book I got off NetGalley, so I had it as an ebook, but basically it's a collection of fairy tales for fearless girls. So it's about girls that go and save the day, and girls that sort out the problems, but they don't just have to use a sword, they can also be really clever, they can be mischievous, they can trick people into getting the right way, they can trick people to doing things. It's about clever girls and being fearless and being brave and not just doing what all the normal fairy tales tell you to do. One great thing about this was it's not just your typical traditional fairy tale, so there's no Cinderella, there's no Beauty and the Beast. The fairy tales in this were not fairy tales I was familiar with, so I don't know if they made them up for the sake of the book, or whether they're just not cultures I'm aware of, because there were illustrations that went with the book and they were so pretty. And the illustrations had coloured characters and characters of various ethnicities. So I don't know if those characters were of different ethnicities to reflect the cultures this story originally came from, or if they were completely new stories and so they could be any culture. But I just think the fairy tales in this were really sweet, were lovely, were really good stories to be able to tell children. and I'd love to be able to share these with children myself one day. I was basically cheating with these books because they weren't a romance. Obviously there's romance in there because it's fairy tales. When aren't there romances and fairy tales? But romance wasn't the main thing, but it was a short book I had on NetGalley and I wanted to get my NetGalley rating up, and so it was the easiest one to read. I started 2 books from NetGalley in January, but I only finished one of them, and that was Mixtape by Jane Sanderson. This book is about 2 characters called Dan and Ali, who were together in Sheffield back in the 80s, but then Ali disappeared and both have moved on with their lives. Dan is now living in Scotland and Ali is now living in Australia. So completely different lives, and they haven't connected for 30 years. Then Dan finds that Ali is a writer and finds her on Twitter, but then out of the blue sends her a song because the 2 originally connected through music. They just send each other songs back and forth for months, but then one breaks the rules by sending a message. I did not like this book. I rated it 2 stars, and that's because I couldn't get over the fact that it was romanticising cheating, and a lot of films and books and romantic stories do that. It's the whole, yes, they're in a relationship, but it's not the right relationship for them. It's that whole kind of soulmate thing that people only have one person they're meant to be with, and they've missed this opportunity. And I couldn't get over it. I couldn't get over the fact that these 2 characters both broke up whole families. They each had a family with children and a partner, and they broke up in favour of this person that they hadn't spoken to in 30 years, other than meeting up once. They didn't even speak over Twitter, they just sent each other messages. And whilst I really like the idea of connecting through music and just sending each other stories, I didn't love, the story. If they weren't in a relationship, maybe I would have loved it more, but I just couldn't get over the fact that we were just meant to forget the fact that they were cheating on their partners. The author did a lot to make us try and forgive it, because I feel like she spent most of her time saying, well, so-and-so wasn't good for Dan, or so-and-so wasn't good for Ali because they didn't listen to their opinions and they didn't take their opinions into account and they're really controlling. And no, they weren't. They were just wanted to be with Dan and Ali, and Dan and Ali didn't see that they were upset that they weren't with someone else. So I didn't love it. I really did like the setting in the past. I liked when they looked back at Sheffield, but I didn't love the present as much. At least I didn't love Scotland, but I did enjoy the vibrancy of Australia. But the 2 settings weren't enough to make me like it more because they were cheating and I hated that. I did, however, like how Ali reconnected with characters from her past at the end, but I feel like Dan didn't have any other characters that he actually liked other than Ali. On a similar vein, I listened to Never Greener by Ruth Jones in January, and I'm torn between ratings for this. On Goodreads it's at 3 stars, but I actually want to give it both 2 stars and 4 stars, which does mean I should give it 3 stars, but it's not a 3-star read. Basically, I wanted to give it 2 stars for the same reason I gave Mixtape 2 stars, where it's about cheating, but the whole point of the book is it's about 2 characters that were together 17 years ago, then had an affair, and then they got caught, so they separated, never contacted each other again, but now they're together again, and you know it's all going to blow up. That's the whole point of the book. It's going to blow up in their faces, and it's about how cheating isn't good. And so I wanted to rate it 2 stars because it's about cheating, and I hated the characters. The main woman was so whiny, she complained about everything, she was just so annoying, but it did the book effectively. The book was meant to be about how cheating is bad, and that came across. But I don't know, I really didn't like it because of the characters and because of the story, but the whole point of the story was you weren't meant to like it, so I'm really torn about how to rate it, because she obviously did it really, really well, but I didn't love it. I also don't feel like I've got any other thoughts on it other than I didn't love it. It did the cheating much more effectively than Mixtape. And maybe that's why I hated Mixtape so much, because I was reading this at the same time and you saw almost the aftershocks of an affair where the people around you are broken and you're sitting there going, oh, it's alright for me, I don't really care about anyone else. But this one's like, and then there's stuff afterwards. You'll form your whole opinion on this relationship, on the sex you have, but have no other connection to that. So, yeah, I don't really know what to rate it. On Goodreads it's at 3 stars, but I hated it and thought it was good, so it's not a 3-star book, but you can't have 2 and 4-star ratings. This month I realised how good my library is for audiobooks and ebooks, which is how I got a copy of Nevergreener. This month I also read 2 other audiobooks, the first of which is Angus, Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging by Louise Renison. This is the first book in whatever the series is. I think it's like Georgia Nicholson's life or something. And it's about a girl called Georgia who I think is 14, she's at school, and she's going through first love, first dating, first sexual kissing experiences. The film Angus, Thongs and Perfect Snogging is based on the first 2 books, so not loads happens in the first book, at least compared to the film. I rated this one 2 stars, not because it was necessarily bad. I think what it was trying to do, it achieved. I just didn't like it. It very much felt like a teen book that girls would love at the time, where they're talking about boobs and boys and thongs and kissing, and it very much felt like if I'd read it in my teens it would have felt really nostalgic to read it now, but now Georgia just seemed really annoying. She really got on my nerves because she was really ungrateful for everything she had. Her parents she was really rude about, she just always wanted them to go away and then didn't appreciate them when they were there. Likewise with her friends, she was always falling out with them, always hating on them, and that's just not what you should do. I mean, it's probably dramatised for the sake of being a good book, making it extra funny, but I just couldn't get on board with it. I also listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by the author, but didn't love it because she was really shrill. She shouted all the time and the voices she put on were really annoying, like the sister was bleh. You know how there are some jokes that just don't age? This was full of them. So there were moments in it where she obviously doesn't think she's going to get a boyfriend, and when you're a teen girl that's the main problem. You don't care about anything else, it's just getting a boyfriend. And so there are a few times where she would get turned down by a guy, or she would turn down a guy, or the guy she liked didn't like her, and she'd just be like, oh my god, I'm never going to get a boyfriend, I'm going to have to be a lesbian. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't. People aren't lesbians because they've got bored of men. I mean, I know that's what girls joke about, but that's not actually how it works. You are a lesbian if you like girls instead of men. And she was always being a bit lesbophobic. I don't think that's a word, but lesbian phobic, and that kind of thing, where she was being really rude about lesbians, being really crappy about them, and it didn't make me feel comfortable. Likewise with all the jokes about suicide, she'd be like, oh, no one's called me today, I've got no friends today, I might as well kill myself. Or, I'd kill myself if I wasn't so depressed. I don't know how that got into a teen book, like, because that's not something teens should be joking about. So I don't know, maybe I was harsher than I should because everyone else seems to love it, but just it wasn't for me. The other audiobook I listened to completion was Love from A to Z by S.K. Alley. This is about 2 Muslim teens who meet through their Marvels and Oddities journal, which they both use to record the world and how they see the world. The girl Zainab is on holiday because she got kicked out of school for protesting about the Islamophobia in one of her classes, and the boy Adam is there because he's gone home because he's actually suffering from MS. He's just quit school, but he hasn't told his dad or his sister yet because his dad is still struggling to come to terms with the fact that his mum died from it not long ago. I picked this one up from the library on a whim because I thought I need another audiobook, why not this one? And it was available quite soon, so I thought it'd be great. I didn't love it at the start because I found the Marvels and Oddities way of reading it kind of felt a bit clunky, but once I got into it I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the characters, I really enjoyed the story, and there was a lot of representation in there that I haven't read a lot about. So there were Muslim characters and characters with disabilities, and I just haven't read that kind of representation before. I'd love to get my own copy of the book just to keep on my shelf because I think it's the kind of book that I'd want to support. It feels like the representation in there was done really well. It feels like the author did her research to talk about the stuff properly. It also felt like a lot of the problems in there were real. So obviously the Islamophobia in the class isn't something that just happens in stories, it's genuinely something that happens, and so including it in a teen book is probably actually quite a good idea because it makes other teenagers aware that it's a problem. As a romance I loved it because where the characters were both Muslim, they couldn't just jump into a romance. They could barely even hold hands without an escort being near, and I think in fact they don't even hold hands. So many people would like it because of the slow burn. I mean, you know that they're going to fall in love, but because of the situation they're in, they have to be friends first. They have to like each other as people, they get to bond as people, they meet each other's friends, they meet each other's family, they learn all about each other, they have fights like every couple does, but I just liked it because it didn't rush into it. It felt like it was more a genuine romance because they knew about each other rather than falling in love because they're the first person they meet, the first person who's nice to them. And so I really, really appreciated it. I also loved how understanding Zainab was of his disability, and I think it was really handled well. Other things of note this month, I am listening to the audiobook of this one. I'm 35 chapters through, so nearly halfway. There are 76 chapters in it, so it's going to take me a while, but I'm slowly plugging through it because I want to reread and annotate the paperback. Check out last week's video if you do want to reread this with me because I have a video about doing that. The romance is bubbling, but the romance hasn't quite started in this, so Iyad is really gay. I didn't realise quite how gay she was from the start, but now I know she's the gay one, and I'm like, how did I miss this before? Because I remember reading it and being like, I wonder which one's gay. But now I'm like, Iyad is so gay. It's really, really interesting. I love this book. Thank you for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Comment down below if you've read any of these books or want to read any of these books, or if I put you off some of these books, let me know because I'd be interested. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I will see you in next week's video. Bye!